Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me. Run.
Hi, welcome to be my guest today. We have, back by popular demand, we have Andy Volpe, and Andy is going to talk again to us about history and art, and boy has he got some cool things. If you're into things like Game of Thrones, right, that type of thing, this is your guy right here. Welcome back, Andy.
Yeah, great
Start
to be
off,
back.
what are you going to show us?
Oh, I actually don't even know really where to begin.
Go for
you mentioned the Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll just jump into that. So, I've trying to get into the fascinating world of archaeological and artifact illustration work.
Okay.
So the first one here, the Vikings, Icelanders of the Viking Age, done by Dr. Bill Short. He runs a group called Hurstwick out in Millbury, actually not far from the Felters Mill.
It's right up here.
Yeah, just down the road, yeah. And he studies Viking arms and armor and combat and culture and the sagas, and translating it from Icelandic, and trying to figure out what kind of information comes from that. So he came out with this book a couple of years ago, and I didn't bring the book with me, but I brought one of the illustrations
So
I
let
did.
me hold that for you, so you don't have to hold two things. Okay.
So that one is two of the houses that exist, the foundations of actual Norse period houses in Iceland, and I did the illustrations for that, and he was describing what the houses look like and the reconstructions of that, and where we kind of get some idea of what house life was like for the Vikings or the Norse.
Andy, did a lot of the Norse people, my husband swears to God I'm part of a Viking cult, but did a lot of them, because we're so Scottish, and my dad's, did a lot of them go over to Scotland? A lot of those, the Nordics?
I don't know. You'd have to read the book.
Here's the other one. Don't forget this one.
Yes, all right.
Okay.
So of course, Game of Thrones is popular nowadays, and this is an illustration I did for Dr. Ken Monshine. Both of these guys, Dr. Short and Dr. Monshine, were both active with Higgins Armory Museum, which I was with for all the way until the end.
And you drew those,
yes,
too.
and I drew these. And actually, a couple of these are in the Higgins collection. So I took notes from that, and that was, if you remember the previous episode that I was on, I had done a whole bunch of drawings of armor on display at the museum that are now transferred and on display again at the Worcester Art Museum.
Yeah.
So a lot of those helmets that I did, helmets, swords, polearms.
Odd. It looks like the guy's nose, the helmet with his nose.
This one is kind of an interesting story. This is the one that started Higgins on his quest for collecting arms and armor.
So strange.
Yeah, this was a peculiar style of helmet that was common in the very late 1300s and into the 1400s, if I remember right.
Was it literally to make room for a nose?
It was. We believe it was designed for protection. So if a lance or a spear comes at your face, it directs the point of the weapon off of your face.
I would think it would go.
Well, you got these little bits and bobs, and it's got a male piece. Yeah, this is a later variant of that.
It looks like what was it? The Silence of the Lambs? It looks like the thing
or
they
Jason,
put on.
like a hockey mask. Yeah.
We have a lot of fans, especially my husband. Game of Thrones. Now, all right, another book.
So now, Dr. Monshine looked at the actual history of medieval and Renaissance arms and armor and warfare and culture, and how that compares to the fantasy world of Game of Thrones. So it's an interesting
So that's
comparative.
another book you can find.
Yep.
Now, you're the artist, and you've read all these books?
I have to admit I'm not really a big fan of Game of Thrones, and I haven't read them. I've seen a couple of the episodes and things like that. So I appreciate what they've done with the series. So we'll go back to, I was talking to you before about printmaking and copper plate engraving.
Yeah.
So what I'm currently working on are these two cards. It's actually the full sheet that I cut because one is sideways.
Okay.
So here's the copper plate, and here is the prints, and these are done in a 1630s style. I'm with a reenacting group or a living history group that does the Salem Militia from Massachusetts in 1630. And I'm kind of designing these cards. If you remember our previous episode with the printing press cards that you do with the printing offices in Faneuil Hall, I'm doing the same sort of thing for the Salem Trained Band.
I had this one upside down.
Yeah. We often get asked, like, well, if you're a band, you don't have any musical instruments. Well, the term trained band in the 1600s referred to the militia. And now we now call it a militia.
I didn't know that.
But yeah, trained band was a new military development in England in the 1590s up through the 1600s. So those cars are of a pikeman, and we've got full-length, 16-foot-long pikes, really spears, and
what is that we kind of epee? That's the
epee is a
sword?
fencing sword that's a kind of common nowadays, but its great ancestor is the rapier. Which is a thrusting weapon.
Andy, before we go to how can people get a hold of you?
All right, so my website is andyvolpe.com, VOLPE, and you can get my email on there. You can see a whole bunch of pictures of my artwork. It's got a link to my Facebook. I try to upload a lot on Facebook, including preliminary and in development stuff like the cards there, and also information on my living history programs.
How long have you been doing this, Andy?
Well, I've been an artist and a history nerd all my life. I have a degree in fine arts from Westfield State College, now Westfield State University. Graduated in 2000 with a degree in fine arts. I fell in love with printmaking almost immediately. I've been doing the historical printing for the printing office of Eads and Gill in more of an old master style in my work. I've been doing that since about 2010. No, a little bit earlier, probably about 2004 is
Were
when
you
I
ever
really
on the
started doing
Cape
it.
in the mid-late 1970s, Cape Cod at all? My father owned Lewis Printing in Dennisport. You would have loved that.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Oh, gee.
Well, I was born in Plymouth, and I grew up in Plymouth and Sturbridge,
Yeah.
so I had both those museums,
Right.
Plymouth Plantation and Old Storage Village.
Very cool. Look at this bag. Is this all leather? Oh, look at this.
So yeah, this is, one of the other things I do is ancient Roman arms and armor and living history presentations to schools, colleges, and libraries. And this is a bag that was found, it's a copy of a bag at the Comacchio shipwreck off the coast of Italy, and it's dated to around the 1st century AD.
And it's still in that shape?
Well, yeah, the shape of the actual artifact.
Good shape, meaning it's still in good shape.
Yeah.
That was the original.
Yeah. Well, no, this isn't the original, obviously, but this is a replica of the original.
How did it last that long?
Yeah, underwater all those years. Yeah. And it turns out that there was a soldier found in Pompeii, in the town next to it called Herculaneum, and he had a bag that looked almost identical to the Comacchio bag. So we take some of that archaeological information and try to figure out, is it standard, exception versus rule. But in here, one of the things I do, other than the arms and armor, is to talk about writing implements that the Romans used. So I've got papyrus, I've got a wax tablet, or the tabula.
This is hard wax.
Yeah, it's a beeswax with a little bit of resin and
what is this?
Coloring. Well, that's papyrus.
But what does it do?
Well, that's paper.
Oh, it's paper. Oh, I thought it was a toy.
So you use the wax tablet with this device called a stylus. And you scratch into it just like you would with pencil and paper. So you can actually try that with the wax. Yeah.
Just to go.
I'll show you.
Okay, he's going to show you. I don't want
So the wax tablet is used just like you would a notebook. They use it as a notebook or a temporary record. So you scratch your message into the wax. It's a little hard to see. You have to kind of get used to the.
Then you put the papyrus over it?
Nope. This is how it works. And you use the contrast of the light to try to read it.
But what do you do after you've scratched it? You have to put it on paper.
Well, you can use this like a temporary notebook.
So you put that over first and then scratch?
No, I'm getting to that.
All right.
So think of this as just like a notepad.
Yeah.
So you write down all your information. If you need to erase or resurface it, you use the flat end. You can actually push the wax and resurface it.
Did you make this?
I had this made for me, and I've made some other parts that I'll show you in just a minute.
Oh.
So the papyrus is so this is your temporary record. This is your notebook. The papyrus, and of course the Egyptians invent this stuff. The Greeks and the Romans got this, and they loved this stuff. And they actually exported this out to the farthest reaches of the empire, like England and the Netherlands.
Sure.
So we have hundreds of papyrus military records.
What is papyrus made of?
So the papyrus plant has these leaves that you smash flat, and you cross-grain them, and you place them on a hot, flat rock.
Okay.
And as it dries, the natural glues in the leaves the actual leaves.
And they roll it over that toilet.
Well, it's just a roll of this is a roll of paper, so like a scroll. This, unfortunately, this is getting a little dry, so it's getting curled up.
Yeah.
But you dip this in ink.
Yeah.
This is a papyrus reed. You cut a tip on it, and then you can write on it. So it's just like writing on paper. And in fact, the word papyrus becomes paper. That's where we get the word paper from.
That's where we get the word paper from.
Yep.
I didn't know that. Now, that's Egyptian, right?
Yes, this is Egyptian, and it's Roman, and it's Greek, and it's used for thousands of years.
Look at this thing.
So now this is interesting. This little tiny piece of metal is a pen nib, and this is dated to around the 3rd century.
See that? It looks like a.
Yeah, well, it's a writing pen. So you take the metal, you split the metal at the very end, and it, just like a dip pen that we have nowadays, you dip that in ink, and you can write with it.
But what did they dip it into? Anything?
Ink. This is the same thing that we use today.
And then the ink will stay on it.
Well, yeah, it'll draw out just as a regular dip pen will now. So if you think of like the calligraphers and things like that.
What is that not medieval? Almost looks like a fingernail up top.
And it predates medieval. It actually goes back to the ancient Romans. So we're talking 200s AD.
Oh my!
So this, when I was growing up, I was told that this didn't show up until the 1830s.
Yeah.
But the reason that feather quill pens and reed pens survive and are used so prominently is because if you break that tip, you can't write anymore. But you can resharpen these over and over and over again.
Let me see this thing. Now, this
and that's just cut out of a reed of papyrus. It's kind of like a bamboo.
This could be dangerous stuff, too. This is pretty sharp.
All right, so one more thing to talk about with ancient Roman is ostraka. Okay. So if you've heard the word ostracize, the ancient Greeks used pieces of pottery shard that they broke off and wrote somebody's name on, and they put that into a ballot in their democracy. So if your name came up too many times, you're voted out you're ostracized. So ostraka
that's pretty cool.
or ostrakon are these little pottery shards that the Romans and Greeks would use like tweets or sales receipts and records, little post-it notes.
So they break a pot to get this?
Yeah. I'm starting to think now, too, that because in Egypt you could make a mud brick like slab and then break that up instead of breaking a pot when you're not using it. But pottery was as common as cardboard boxes are today for the Romans and Greeks. So you could just grab a pot, break it, and use it, and you get another one coming tomorrow.
Andy, are you available to give presentations?
I love giving presentations.
How do they get you?
My website, andyvolpe.com. You can find me also on Facebook. And I'm on a couple of databases on school presentations like the Massachusetts Library Commission. You can find me on there. Though I've been getting a lot of hits on Facebook and things like that. So that's some of my Roman stuff.
Yeah.
We'll jump ahead in time a little bit to the 1600s.
Oh, look! It looks like a torture.
Yeah. This is like one of my mystery items. When I give presentations on my medieval and Renaissance art, I like to show that to kids and have them try to figure out what that is. It's not a weapon. No. This is known as a penner. This is a traveling pen case.
Yeah.
So this slides off. It's got a little inkwell in there, and it's got a feather quill.
Hold it up there, Andy.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a feather quill.
Yeah.
A writing pen.
It's a feather quill. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got another one right here that's a little used. So it's got still some ink, dried ink in there.
Wow, that's...
So this is the kind of penner. So in the Middle Ages with the scribes, they had leather cases with a pottery pot ink pot that would hang on the other side.
Yeah.
This is from the 17th century, so somewhere in the 1800s. This is a copy, obviously. Everything that I use is a copy of an original. So that's that one. This is one from the 1770s.
This looks like a cigarette case.
Yeah. So you hold the bottom and you slide off the top. And there's your traveling ink case.
Oh.
Isn't that the cleverest little thing?
17th century.
Yep.
Oh,
And
wow.
what I also like to do is I'll hand these to kids. This is an original.
Yeah.
This is 200 years old.
How did you find that?
I got it in a antique auction.
Oh, my God.
So, yep.
So then you just put the top over.
Yeah, you just put the top over it, and you put it in your pocket, and you travel with your ink case.
You do that, too? Did you do your art that way, too?
I'm starting to slowly develop bringing all the stuff to schools and things like that. Here's a pencil.
Yeah.
So this dates back to the early Middle Ages. So you've got a pair of pinchers.
Yeah.
And this little slider will close those pinchers shut. So you put your chalk or your writing device in there, slide that closed, and that's your pencil.
Who knew?
Clever. Are you familiar with M.C. Escher? He was a famous artist who did optical illusions in the 1930s. There's one where he's got his hand, drawing his hand on, so he's holding one of these. A little chocolate.
I like Jackson Pollock. You know the guy that threw paint?
Oh, yes, yeah.
And it became so popular.
A friend of mine at Westfield State was studying Pollock and his technique when I was studying the old masters. So
There's your bird. There's the bird.
I'll have you hold those
All
two.
right.
There's
You
two
brought
of them.
these last time, right?
No, these are new. Well, these are
Okay.
different
All right.
from what I brought before. So this is the copper plate that prints these two images. This is the black and white, obviously, and then I hand-colored it with watercolors and a brush. And this is the copper plate that prints that. So this is done with etching, which is acid, and engraving. And this turns out to be the same technique that Rembrandt uses in the 1600s. He combined both processes. So engraving is where you're using an engraving tool called a burin.
And that
I'll
you use.
try to show
well,
that.
you've got one that's colored and one is not.
Yes, yeah. So I'll show that so you can get a little contrast here. You can see the point on that thing is very, 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 very sharp. And you use a sandbag and you balance the plate on that.
Yep.
You push the plate into the tool to do all your curves and cutting. So all those lines will then hold ink inside the plate. You run it through the press, and that pulls the ink off. And then I get to color it. I make my own paint-by-number style.
Andy, do you sell these? You do,
I
don't
do.
you?
Yep.
Where can they buy them?
So I have my private art studio in Whitensville at the
Alternatives?
It's now it's called Open Sky, but yeah, it's where Alternatives is.
Yeah.
I'm next to that in a little in the old brick mill, the 1840s brick mill, and my historical printing that I do for the printing office of Viets and Gill, which is all Paul Revere and 1700s. That's at Faneuil Hall in Boston, and I'm trying to do more stuff online.
Where have you been going giving presentations? Where did you go?
Yesterday, I was with my friend Quentin with the 3rd Legion. We did a presentation at Fitchburg State University for their Roman Day.
Yeah.
On Monday, I was at Concord Carlisle Middle School. I will be at Pawtucket School in West Newbury on Monday. And
Monday, which is April 8th.
Yep, next week. And then I've got a couple other schools down in Southern Connecticut later on in April.
So you're getting scheduled with no problem. You're okay.
Yeah. I am totally open to coming in and figuring that out. So yeah,
We're talking with Andy Volpe. He's history and art, and as you can see, this medieval, amazing.
Yeah.
Got something to show us too?
I got some other interesting things. Oh, I got so much stuff
I know.
to
I
show
don't
you.
think we're
It's
gonna have
great.
time for.
Oh yeah, I'll try to scramble through.
He'll be back.
This is Gentleman's Magazine from 1753.
Okay, when we say gentleman's magazine, do we really mean a gentleman's magazine, or do we mean the other kind?
Gentleman in the terms of the 18th century.
In other words,
so
nice.
a well-learned man, yes, you can read and write and all this grand
All right,
stuff.
this is not bathroom material. This is the good stuff.
No.
Oh,
Ironically, the term centerfold originates from these magazines because when they did illustrations, and I'll have you open that up in a second. Yeah, go ahead and actually look through it.
Looks like the Bible.
They would put the like a map or something like that. They would fold that up and they would bind it in the middle of the magazine when they were binding it at the binders.
Where'd you find these?
There's a place called Timothy Hughes down in Pennsylvania. He's online. Rare Newspapers, I believe, is the name of the website.
What the heck? What is that?
And you can buy them.
Oh.
That is a. I don't quite remember what that illustration is. You'd have to look through it. But if you go back to that cardinal illustration that you saw earlier.
The bird.
Yep.
Come on, birdie. Where are you?
There
we are.
If you look, that's printed and then it's colored. So this is a common thing that they do in the
They didn't have
18th
colored
century.
pencils back then?
They no, not really. They had watercolors and oil paint, but
This
they
looks
used
like
watercolors.
watercolor. Yeah,
it's watercolor.
This looks like watercolor.
So, and that was a great way to help sell the magazine because then you can pull that out of the magazine and put it up on your
Where's
wall.
the cover? Looks like it's been.
This is just a very easy binding. A very cheap, very cheap binding. Yeah, that's it.
They didn't have covers back then.
They did and they didn't. Some magazines did. So this is Massachusetts Magazine from 1791.
Wow.
And this has one of my. I was so glad I got this. This has an engraving of a Baltimore Oriole. So that's 200 years old. You're holding in your hand right now.
Oh.
So do be gentle.
Yes.
So we were talking about covers. So this is the cover.
Yeah.
But then you've got the inside cover. So the cover usually had all of the had a description, a table of contents of what was in this magazine's issue, and then you'd open it up to the title.
1753.
Yep, and then 1791. So this is where magazines originate.
Andy. Oh my God.
Yep. And if you looked if you also noticed in the Gentleman's Magazine, pardon me while I'll file through here, and I need to bookmark these. Here's another engraving.
Oh, this looks like a castle.
Yeah, this was a popular thing for these magazines. They would go to ruins. This is all part of the time period of the Grand Tour, where gentlemen would go to like Italy and look at the ruins. And this is the National Geographic magazine of their time period.
This was like national.
Yeah. Yeah, people would read about the world around them and what's going on in town at the same time.
And the women weren't really into all this, right? They weren't really, were they?
I should have brought that. There is a specific women's magazine that they published out of London.
But did they dumb it down? Wasn't it as good as this?
No. They had focused things, kind of like Red Book and stuff like that today. They had things like how to care for the household and music. Okay. They had printed music. Men's magazines tended to have more almanacs and weather reports for farming and things like that.
Geographic things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was. They also had political discourse in both types of magazines. So this was the regular reading. So I mentioned before about the plate mark, which is the edge of the plate.
Right.
Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see it here in the camera, but right on that very edge, you can just barely see that. If you go back to our previous episode, I was talking about they took a lot of efforts to flatten out the print as much as possible. But
Andy, we're running out of time. Again, how can they reach you?
AndyVolpe.com. V as in Victor, O-L, P as in Peter, E. I'm also on Facebook, Andy Volpe Art and History. You can search for me on there. You can find my Roman legionary programs that are available to schools and colleges, libraries, historical societies.
And you live in Grafton?
I live in Worcester.
Oh, okay.
Right now. I used to live in Grafton.
And I first saw your art at that show in Grafton.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That was the
gosh, it's gorgeous.
The Small Stones.
Was it an
art
owl?
festival. Yes, it was a short-eared owl.
Got my attention immediately.
So let's do the bang through of the rest of the stuff. So this is another drawing I did of Higgins Army Museum before they closed in 2013. These are Greek and Roman and Etruscan helmets that were popular in the late Bronze Age. This is a gladiator helmet, and that's still on display at the Worcester Art Museum, right prominently. This Montefortino style that was in use in the Roman Republic, that's on display in the Roman Room.
That's like the guy that was the executioner when you lost your head.
yeah. Yeah, those helmets are very tightly fitted to the head, very different from later Roman
I wouldn't want to see him
helmets.
coming at me, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. So there's that. So I do all sorts of crazy stuff, and just some more owls, because, why not? Everybody loves owls.
Owls are my fave. Yeah.
So you're holding one of my latest. So the other one you might remember is the Great Horned Owl.
Yeah.
That was the first one in this series. Yeah. So this is the latest one, number 4, and that's a long-eared owl. Yes. And they tend to like to do this shrunken sort of. A lady who bought a print of that at a show I was at, called it Judgmental Owl, and she put it above her desk. So she was a manager. So when people walk in, they're judged by this.
And he's beautiful. That's a barn owl.
And this is a great gray owl.
Okay.
They are very uncommon in New England. They show up every now and then, what we call invasion years. There was one that came down in Gloucester area back in 1999. Caused quite a stir. But these guys are very common in Minnesota and Manitoba in Canada. But they're huge, but they're full of feathers.
The work that goes into these, Andy has that detail. Yeah. I mean, really, how long does it? Must take you a long
hours. Yeah, I don't really keep track. I probably should, but
jeepers, creepers. So now, people want to have you come to a presentation again. How do they reach you?
If you want a Roman medieval art printing demo, I am open to that. Mostly Roman is really my most common. You can find me on my website, andyvolpe.com. You can find me on Facebook. If you look for Andy Volpe Art and History, you'll probably find me, or Roman Andy Volpe Roman. You'll probably find pictures of me on there too.
We're going to have you back? Because there's a lot more to
I can
cover.
Keep going. I can keep bringing
That's
stuff.
That's how I knew last time. Now we're going to have him back again, right? You will, right?
I'll absolutely love to come back, yeah.
Okay, we got summer coming and everything, and this would be really cool, because I know I can just tell there's a lot more that we could talk about. Thanks for being with us.
I can go on for hours aimlessly.
That's cool. That's my kind of guest.
All right.
We'll see you next time and be my guest.
All right, thank you.
Good job.